Hola, mi nombre es Daniela Cepeda Martínez de Promoción de Paz, su maestra de inglés, y el día de hoy vamos a ver nuestra clase número 3. Our topics for today's class include as, not as, and comparing places. As is used to say one person, thing, or place is equal in characteristics to another, while not as is used to say that two people, places, or things are different in some characteristic. For example, as is used in affirmative statements. Affirmative sentences compare people, things, and places that are the same in some way. For example, Paula is as intelligent as Diego. This car is as expensive as the other. This school is as good as that one. As you can see, between the first as and the other as, we use an adjective, intelligent, expensive, good, etc., to compare two nouns. In this case, Paula and Diego, and the car and the other car. And in the case of not as, which is used to make negative statements, these negative sentences compare people, things, and places that are different in some way. For example, my uncle is not as young as my father. Not as, then an adjective, and as again. Mi tío no es tan joven como mi papá. Soda is not as nutritious as milk. Not as, adjective, and as. La coca no es tan nutritiva como la leche. Cancún is not as old as Puebla. Let's continue with some examples. Now we're going to use as and not as to compare both dogs and both cats. For example, the old dog is as pretty as the puppy. As, adjective, and as, comparing two nouns, in this case the old dog and the puppy. Then we have the puppy is not as big as the old dog. Not as, adjective, and as. In the case of the cats, we use the same formula, which is the white and brown cat is not as hairy as the brown cat. Not as, adjective, and as. The brown cat looks as lovely as the white and brown cat. As, adjective, and as. El gato café se ve igual de bonito que el gato blanco con café. El cachorro no es tan grande como el perrito viejo. We're finished with our first topic, and now we're going to see what is comparing places. Comparing places is used to compare places considering a location, environment, cultural facts, and general condition. Here we have some examples of adjectives we can use to compare some places. Polluted, expensive, quiet, dangerous, warm. Polluted in Spanish is contaminado. Expensive is caro. Quiet, callado. Dangerous, peligroso. Warm, caliente, etc., etc. Stressful, estresante. Crowded, con mucha gente, poblado, etc. For example, let's compare the city and the country or farm. Number one, the city is more polluted than the country. As you can see here, we are comparing two things, two places. So we're going to use the comparative form, more polluted than. Remember that when we want to compare two things or two places in this case, we're going to use more than, or in the case of example number 2, the city is noisier than the country. It's the comparative between the city and the country. And instead of writing the city is more noisy noisy than the country. Here we only add the ending ER to the word noisy and changing the Y to an I. Number 3, the country is a cheaper place to live in. And number 4, the city is more crowded than the country. Entonces, en español, la ciudad es más contaminada que el pueblo. La ciudad es más ruidosa que el pueblo es más barato, es un lugar más barato para vivir y la ciudad está más poblada que el pueblo. So we're finished with today's topics. Remember that when we use as and not as, we are going to compare two things that have similar characteristics or different characteristics, always adding an adjective between as or not as. And in the case of comparing places, remember that you're going to use your previous knowledge of comparative and superlative, and we are going to add several adjectives like I mentioned before, and that's about it. Entonces, recuerden que cualquier duda o cualquier comentario lo pueden hacer y yo trataré de atenderlo lo más rápido posible para hacer mejores videos y que aprendamos muchísimo más fácil. Muchas gracias por su atención y nos vemos pronto.